Please let us get in. Don't lock us away with nothing that you're thinking. And it's sweaty. Hello everyone, my name is Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages 101 to 123, which is one of 4 horrible readings. By that I mean very long ones. We're reading chapters 19 to 22, and it should be pretty long, but not too long to where it becomes this whole thing and this whole problem. So without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 19. So you've all heard about these mansions, but you've never seen one yourself, Bobby asked him, as they traveled across the overworld by the light of the moon. Actually, I did see one once, Ben told her, from the outside, at a safe distance. I heard all sorts of stories of what might be stalking around inside, and I figured I wasn't ready for this sort of challenge. He looked up at the moon. It was before I met Logan. He really helped me refine my skills. I'm ready for a woodland mansion now, he hoped. They had left the swamp behind then, and were traveling back through the savannah region surrounding Savannah Town. It was warm, like a swamp, but without all the murky water. Ben was relieved not to devote so much mental energy to watching his step, particularly since they needed to be on the lookout for hostile creatures. For once, they were trying to avoid all dangerous mobs. In fact, Ben was hoping to find a bit of trouble. It didn't take long. The trees were sparse, giving them a good view of their surroundings. And in the dead of night, monsters were never hard to come by. I see something, whispered Bobby. To the northwest. Ben strained his eyes, peering into the dark, then nodded. It's a creeper. That's perfect. You said a weird definition for perfect, said Bobby. Aren't creepers the ones who blow up? When you get close, yeah, said Ben. He ducked behind the tree and gestured for her to come to do the same. That means the timing of your attacks is critical, and that's the exact lesson you need to learn. Bobby looked over his shoulder at him, and then tried to brothers lead to a post. My timing was pretty good against that spider in Savannah Town. Yeah, but I was drawing its attention with my strategic weeping, Ben said. That was the siege of your village. Did you fight any zombies that night? Sort of, Bobby answered, but I didn't defeat any. It would hit one and then run before I could recover. That's what I'm talking about, said Ben. It's easy enough to hit an enemy one time, but when a mob is coming after you, then it's really fighting back. You need to choose your moments carefully. Just lashing out randomly will leave you open to counterattack. Like with the slimes, said Bobby. The way you waited until they're leaping forward? Exactly, said Ben. It's even more important with a creeper. You have an iron sword, which means it'll take several hits to defeat it. If you stand in place of a slash, you're in big trouble. Kaboom? Asked Bobby. Kaboom, Ben confirmed. Focus on your footwork. Keep some distance between you and the dart forward and slash and you see an opening. Bobby hefted her sword. She had a good grip. But Ben could see the doubt in her eyes. You got this, he said. You're smart, and that's what he wins to fight. He thought about it for a second. Sometimes a diamond sword wins a fight, but we work with that we have. As they approached the creeper, Ben let Bobby walk ahead of him. He kept close, though. He had a sword at his ready. If her timing was off and she got into trouble, he would only have seconds to step in and help her. But he didn't need to have worried. Bobby was the natural. Once the creeper had noticed her, she held her ground, letting it come to her, then batting it away with her sword as soon as it came up within reach. She just as Ben told her, keeping her sword up as she stepped back, then lunged forward for her attack. Bobby leaped up and cheered when the creeper last fell over and evaporated in a burst of harmless dust. Ben wanted to cheer for her, and she shushed her and said, You don't want to draw every hostile mob in the area this way, he warned. Beating one mob in one-on-one combat is one thing, but fighting multiple enemies? You're as stingy as your prize as you are with your loot, said Bobby. And she ran forward to collect the small piece of gunpowder left behind by the creeper. So I'm keeping this. Ben laughed. Fair, but be careful with it. It isn't food seasoning, you know. They went back to collect Johnny, then continued on their way. Bobby felt a rush of battle, scanning the horizon for their next adversary. What's that? She said, in the distance, over there. Ben turned to look, then quickly averted eyes. His brief glimpse was enough to give impression of that tall, spindly figure, unnaturally long with his limbs, and his eyes glowed in visual. That's an Enderman, he said. Don't look. They crouched behind a small incline. They were still a good distance from the mob, but at their route, it would take them right past it. I've seen one of them before, Bobby told him. It's eerie, but they seem harmless. They are harmless, usually, but they also can be very aggressive, Ben explained. Staring at them as sunfire way to set them off. They always have tricky to fight, and I'd rather avoid angering it. Let's just hang here for a moment and hope it goes on without its business. Okay, Bobby said. She began fidgeting almost immediately. It's hard not to look, though, she said. It's like when someone tells you not to think about axolotls, and then that's all you want to think about for the rest of the day. It sounds like a very strange game, said Ben, but I know what you mean. By not looking at the enemy, you don't know what it's doing, and so it feels like you're vulnerable to an attack. But the enemy only attacks if you look at it. It's like a super mind game. You've just got an extra control over its own impulses, and oh no, Ben turned to look at Johnny, who stood off to the side, gazing into the night. Zombie boy over there is nothing but impulses. Johnny, said Bobby, yoo-hoo, look at me. Don't look out there. At this complete lack of response, she just took her head. Never could get him to listen. She sat in silence for a moment, then turned back to Ben. How much of him is still in there, do you think? Can we cure him? Will he remember any of this? I have no idea, said Ben, and he leaned against the grassy hill block his back. I mean, how much do you remember about being a baby? We tend to forget all sorts of things. I don't remember much, Bobby agreed. Ben hesitated before he pressed on. Have you always lived in Plaintown? Yes. I mean, you're from there. I know what you're getting at, said Bobby. I used to get questions like this whenever an adventure passed through town. I don't mean to pry. No, it's okay, Bobby said. I'm not sensitive about it. I'm obviously different than most villagers, she shrugged. I'm adopted. My parents found me as a baby, and to answer for your earlier question, I don't remember what day or anything before it. Growing up, I always knew I was foundling. They never hid that from me. But they always been my parents, as far as I remember. She looked suddenly solemn. Or they were my parents. I keep forgetting they're not back home waiting for me. Ben wasn't entirely comfortable with displays of emotion, but he knew better than let loose words hang in the air acknowledge. I'm sorry, he said again. After a moment's hesitation, he reached over and patted her on the helmet. Bobby gave him a puzzled look. Did you just pet me? No, I was comforting you, he answered. Is that what that was? Bobby said, and she laughed. But hey, Johnny didn't bite your hand off or anything, so that's progress. Yeah, said Ben. He and I will be best buddies in no time, I bet. Johnny, sensing the renewed attention, made a ghastly rasping noise. Adorable, said Ben, and he peeked out from above the incline. All clear, I think. And Johnny didn't draw the Enderman's ire, so maybe things are really going to go our way. Knock on wood, said Bobby, and she sat down on a wooden plank, just so she had something to hit as she said it. Chapter 20. Even Johnny seemed very wary to walk among the trees of the dark forest. Bobby sensed the slightest hesitation of his part, a subtle tug upon his lead, and they approached the tree line, as if it were dragging his feet. She wanted to give him a pep talk, but the dark oak trees loomed over them, and the inky blackness of the tree shrouded night opened above to receive them. It was all she could do to suppress a shudder of fear. She almost forgotten used to the darkness of night, but the forest offered a deeper darkness. It was a thick canopy of leaves, blocking out any hint of moonlight. This is creepy, Bobby whispered as they entered the forest, but nothing to worry about, right? Oh, there's a lot to worry about, said Ben. Keep your eyes open. This place is probably crawling with monsters. The trees grew close together, so they had to walk single file instead of side by side. Bobby let Ben walk in front so that she could remain between him and Johnny. It doesn't seem much farther, Ben said, consulting the map. We might actually make it there without any hassle. Bobby knew as soon as he said it that they were doomed. There was a twang sound and a rush in the air, and suddenly next to the tree Ben appeared to sprout a new limb. Not a limb, Bobby realized, an arrow. We're under attack, she yelled, and Ben told her, run! She did as she suggested, happily. But there were so many trees, it was so dark. She made it only a few steps before Johnny's lead became tangled. Wrapped around a trunk, they passed on opposite sides. The fastest way to untangle them was to drop the lead, but she was worried too much about getting separated in the forest. It was too easy for him to disappear into the gloom, but maybe that gloom could work to their advantage. Maybe they already evaded their attacker. No such luck, Bobby looked back in the direction they fled from. They could see a movement in the gloom, a shock of white, a ghoulish face, with a bow, aimed directly at her. Before Bobby could react, Ben was there, stepping in front of her, batting the arrow aside with his shield. Wow, thanks, said Bobby. I'd say don't mention it, but I live for the praise, said Ben, and he ran ahead, closing the distance between him and the attacker in 4 quick strides. Bobby watched to be certain, and he had up her hand before she turned away and started untangling Johnny's lead. For this part, her brother simply stood in place, blinking. One skeleton down, said Ben. I got some more arrows from it, and look, it's fresh. She held a bone out to Johnny, who sniffed with suspicion before snatching it from Ben's grip. He sat down in the dirt and said immediately to gnawing on it. You know, that's still creepy, said Ben. I'm sorry, said Bobby. I was no help at all. Oh, I wouldn't say that, Ben said. You drew its fire long enough for me to get into striking distance. He hefted his sword, which appeared to be blunted with overuse. I still wish I had a better blade, though. It took forever to hack it up, and we're making too much noise. I have a feeling we're about to be overwhelmed. What can we do? Asked Bobby. Should we try tunneling the rest of the way? Right idea, wrong direction, Ben smirked. You're not afraid of heights, are you? Bobby hadn't thought about that she was afraid of heights, but she never really put that to the test. Are you sure these things can support our weight, she asked, loading out her arms and said to herself. Pretty sure, Ben answered. As long as you don't make a wrong step. Bobby gripped the lead more tightly. Stay close, Johnny, she said. Step where I stepped. Johnny gnawing on his bone made no reply. They had taken a canopy crossing the breadth for the forest by the way the very rooftop. Shadowy shapes lurked far below them. Bobby caught glimpses of them through the leaves. But up top there was no mobs nor monsters to fear. Only gravity, and the gentle sway of the branches beneath their feet. She moved slowly but steadily, taking one measured step at a time. Despite its size, the woodland mansion seemed to Bobby to almost appear out of nowhere. One moment she was navigating the endless expanse of a canopy, the next the leaves parted, and she saw a great building looming before them. It was huge, perhaps as large as all Powhatan, built in a dark wood and cobblestone. It rose above the trees in a massive beast, as if rows of identical windows glaring at the eyes of spider, pitiless, multitudinous points it lit in the dark. Bobby followed Ben's careful hop of the canopy to leaves, then guided Johnny across the small gap. They stood together on the sloping roof of wood, similar to the oak used to construct Plaintown, but darker. "Which way is the front door?" asked Bobby. "And how are we going to get down from here?" "You have got to stop thinking like a villager," said Ben. "Oh," and with his sword he shattered the nearest window. "Ta-da! One entrance." Bobby gasped. "That's hardly going to endear us for whoever lives here. We're not here to make friends, Bobby," Ben said as he ducked through the window frame. "And the creeps who call this place home were never going to like us." Bobby followed him aside, pulling Johnny behind her, and they were in some kind of dining room, which potted flowers placed atop a long table and simple chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Nearly everything was made of wood. "It's sort of cozy," Bobby said, determined to be positive. The truth was, the house was unsettling atmosphere. The bed affected his spooky voice. "If you like it here, then perhaps you will stay forever." He waved his hand in front of her face and made ghostly noises. He slapped his hands away. "You're not funny, or scary, or whatever you're trying to be." "Charming," said Ben, pretending to pout. "The answer is always charming." "Then you're way off the mark," teased Bobby. "I won him over," said Ben, but Johnny, having completely devoured the bone and been occupying its attention, grabbed menacingly in Ben's direction. "That beastly growl reminds me. We should be careful. These places are supposed to be crawling with trouble. Not just monsters, but spellcasters and act murderers, too." Bobby barely suppressed a shudder. "I was picturing a bright palace of fairy tale. This is more like a haunted house from a ghost story." "There's no such thing as ghosts," said Ben. "Worry about the axe murderers instead." They moved quietly, swords drawn, and they crept up to the upstairs hallway. The hall is a high ceiling with tall columns, and lined with torches and open doors. A vibrant red carpet ran the length of the hall. Looking at it, Bobby tried not to be reminded of blood. It was only a short distance from the first open doorway, which Ben approached with caution. He leaned against the hallway wall for a moment, gripping his sword in front of him, taking a deep breath before he whirled around, rushing into the room in the battle-ready stance. Only for a moment later he said, "It's all clear," and sort of random. Bobby saw what he meant as soon as he followed him inside. It was a small, boxy room, empty of everything, except a large pile of wool, all dyed in various shades of blue. "On the long list of everything that I expected to see," said Bobby, "blue wool was very low." Johnny's reaction was somewhat more enthusiastic. The zombie boy groaned, lurched forward, and fell face first into a pile of wool. "Did he do that on purpose?" asked Ben. "He's not going to eat it, is he?" Bobby watched as her brother thrashed around, sending blocks of wool flying in the air and across the room. She smiled a little sadly. "He's playing," she said. "See? He's still in there. Somewhere." And the next room contained rows of bookshelves and inviting benches. This made Bobby immediately nostalgic of Plaintown's library, a little guilty remembering the state she left it in. After that they found a bedroom with all neatly made bed. The musty air suggested that Bobby's room was not been used in some time. They relaxed their guard as they continued exploring the room after room. Bobby, for one, assumed this place would be completely abandoned. Ben was a little more wary, but even let his sword fall to his side. "This is outright bizarre," Bobby said as she examined an oak tree growing in a small patch of dirt. "Who puts a tree inside a house?" Ben crouched beside her, checking the chest for traps. "Sign balls," he said once he finally opened it. "It's empty, and look." He stood, crossing the room's entrance. "At some point, this room was sealed off with planks. The door we came through was actually a hole that somebody made." He shook his head. "That explains the lack of monsters. Somebody's come through and cleared them all out." "You see that like it's a bad thing," said Bobby, "but I could use fewer monsters in my life." "You don't get it," said Ben. "It's a high-risk, high-reward situation. These mansions are supposed to be perilous, but adventurers still seek them out because their loot isn't worth the danger." "Look like a golden apple?" asked Bobby. "Yeah, exactly," Ben sighed. "Someone beat us here. They picked the place clean and everything valuable. We won't find a golden apple here." Bobby fought a wave of disappointment again. She struggled not to let her frustration show. Instead, she forced a smile. "Well, we'll just have to look somewhere else," she said. "Let's come up with a new plan." Ben comforted her optimism, responded with a look of abject terror. Bobby, perplexed, said, "Are you okay with that? Can we negotiate your rate, if it helps?" Ben gripped her shoulders, rolled her around. At the far end of the hallway, she frightened himself. "Is that a..." she began. "Ghost?" said Ben. Chapter 21. The ghostly figure hasn't seen them yet. It drifted aimlessly along the hallway on the dark, tattered wings. As Ben watched, it passed right through a column, as if it had no physical substance. The sword it held looked substantive enough to do some damage. "I thought there was no such thing as ghosts," hissed Bobby. "Believe me, so did I," whispered Ben. "I've definitely never seen one before now. But it doesn't look too tough. I mean, it's got a sword, which is better than a barbed tentacles or prehensile ectoplasmic tongue." "Your imagination is horrible," said Bobby. They took in silence for a moment, considering the specter at a distance. "Okay, so here's what we're going to do," Ben said at last. "I'm going to try to take it out with arrows. You be ready with your sword in case arrows don't do enough damage." "Are you sure it's hostile?" asked Bobby. Ben wasted no time swapping his sword for his bow and lining up a shot. "It's not hostile now, it's about to be." He let an arrow fly. It thunked instantly into a column, missing the target by a good margin. "What was that?" asked Bobby. "I'm out of practice, Ben." Sword! The arrow had failed to hit, but it succeeded in drawing the mob's attention. It flapped its wings furiously, bearing down on them with a sinister intent in its eyes. Johnny leaped into his path, knocking off course before it close to the swinging sword. With the mob caught off guard, Ben and Bobby acted quickly, in unison. Ben worried their weapons might pass right through it, but his fears were unfounded. The mob was vanquished in a matter of moments. That went well, said Ben. Maybe that should have been a plan all along. We're not done yet, warned Bobby, and Ben lifted his gaze into time to see a second ghostly imp materialize at the very end of the hallway. How many arrows do you have? Asked Bobby. Not enough, said Ben. Let's just stab it a whole bunch. Ben ran down the remaining trench of the carpet, striking the mob with the sword faster than it reacted to presence. After the first blow, he stood back, lifting his shield and swaying out of its reach, and he learned its attack patterns. In the meantime, Bobby snuck around behind it. Trapped in between, the mob proved his easy prey. Did you see where it came from? Ben asked. Did it just appear out of nowhere? Not nowhere, said Bobby. She pressed a hand into the wall. It came through this wall, but there's no door. Well, said Ben. I know, Bobby smirked, put her sword away, and pulled the pickaxe. I need to stop thinking like a villager, right? As soon as Bobby had made an opening, Ben ran through with his sword held high. Whatever might be on the other side of this wall, he felt might be an element of surprise would be crucial. But Ben hesitated when he saw a figure inside. They looked at Ben in their wide eyes, uttering a startling sound, then raised their hands. Ben saw immediately that those hands were empty of any weapons. Had a stranger been trapped here in a small, dark room? Did they need help? Hi, said Ben, lowering his sword. Everything cool in here? Sorry to barge in. Stranger's face twisted in an unmistakable sign of aggression. Ben had a sudden impression that their arms were not raised in surrender after all, but their empty hands were calling forth some terrible power. Slime balls, he's casting a spell, Ben said under his breath. He charged. Too late. With a word of command, it sounded like a woo-woo. The spellcaster summoned a ring of traps. One would appear just beneath Ben's feet. It snapped shut, like a mouth lined with razor-sharp fangs, and Ben was pinned in place. The pain was excruciating, like being stabbed with half a dozen swords all at once. Though the haze of pain, Ben chided himself in dropping his guard. It was Bobby's fault. She had rubbed off on him in the worst possible way, and now her talk first fight later approach was going to get him killed. An arrow was by his ear, lodging itself in the spellcaster's shoulder. They barked in pain and surprise and turned to flee. The trap released its grip on Ben and staggered to the floor. Nice shot, he said through teeth clenched in pain. Thanks, said Bobby. I just tried to do the opposite of what you did. So far it's working out for me. Happy to help, wheezed Ben, and he rose unsteadily to his feet. The spellcaster, Ben recognized now as an evoker, was a dangerous foe, but wearing only a simple robe, they were also a vulnerable one. The evoker was attempting to escape, but there was no exit in the room. Ben and Bobby had cornered. This time, Ben showed no mercy. The wicked wizard backed up against the wall. He brought the sword down while Bobby continued firing arrows from a distance. Their foe finally collapsed and turned to dust. They dropped some loot, Ben said, and he sat back in the door. Grab it, won't you? I need to eat something to get my strength back. While Ben munched a slice of melon, Bobby went believe in an unfamiliar item. This is some kind of doll, she said. It's familiar, but from where? She held it out for Ben to see. It was a golden idol, humanoid in shape, with bright green eyes. I've never seen anything like it, he said. Johnny, who's led Bobby and the combination, wandered off to sniff at the item. Evidently deciding it was indictable, he wandered off again. Hold on, said Bobby. She stashed the idol in inventory, then pulled a witch's journal and began flipping it through. Aha, she said, tapping on a page. It's in here, some sort of magic relic. Here's a picture of a skull with an X drawn over it. She looked at Ben. Maybe it's a weapon against skeletons. Sounds valuable, Ben said. Let's hold on to it. He felt his strength returning, but the memory of those fangs was hard to shake. Who knows what else is going to run into this place? As it turned out, they didn't encounter any more resistance. They continued to explore the mansion. And, other than a few melons harvested from an indoor farm, they didn't find any loot either. Whoever ransacked the place must have wished a hidden room, Ben said as they stood at the entrance hall of the ground floor. Other than that, they're impressively thorough. So, now what? Asked Bobby. Do we need to find another forest, another mansion? That would take a long time, said Ben. Years. I've got an under idea. Ben led him to the front door to a cobblestone porch, surrounded by dark oak trees. The canopy extended right up to the mansion's walls. Though it was day, the shade was deep and unbroken, protecting Johnny's eyes from direct sunlight. A pop of red caught Ben's eye, standing out on the other side of otherwise muted colors of this mansion's exterior. Someone had planted a banner inside of the entrance, a long red flag, embellished with the image of a skull and crossbones. But that wasn't why Ben had led him there. He once more drew his sword, then straining to reach, he let out, slashing through the canopy. The leaves frayed, the branches shattered, and after a short while, an item dropped into the broken foliage. Ben leaned over, picked it up, and presented it to Bobby. It was a perfect, glossy, bright red apple. We don't need to find a golden apple, he told her. We'll just have to make one. Chapter 22. They needed to go deeper. Deeper? Said Bobby. I feel like we've been digging for ages. Just as he had never had an opportunity to consider where she was afraid of heights, Bobby had rarely the occasion to wonder if she might be claustrophobic. She had done a little digging for coal in the past, and she felt no great sense of unease when they had walked around the underground rail tunnel or camped out in Ben's burrow in the edge of the swamp. But this was different. There was no blocks of dirt hanging suspended over her head, obstructing her access to free and open air. Bobby tried not to think about it, but it proved hard, resolving not to look at an Enderman. Her mind kept drifting back to the cramped, suffocating thoughts. Ben kept digging. Deeper is better, he said. Technically, you can find gold almost anywhere, but it's more common a bit farther down than this. Ben cut a narrow, decent path through the subterranean stone. Like a steep and artless staircase, it was the direction. Bobby placed his torches around the path, picked up any stray bits of coal, and came loose as she dug. "I think sure we make a good team," she said brightly. "Sure," he said, huffing. "That's what the person with the easy job always says." "Oops, I just dropped Johnny's lead," Bobby said. "What?" Ben said, whirled around, gripping his pick like a sword. "Just kidding," Bobby said brightly. "But let me know if you want to trade jobs at any point." Ben gave her a dirty look. "I'll stick to digging, thanks." Eventually, Ben hacked his way through the cave. A narrow, descending passage opened through the underground space around Bobby's home. But the scraggy, irregular edges in a single passageway led off into pitch darkness. Bobby was quick to place torches all around. "Careful with those," Ben said. "We're in trouble if we run out." "I've got wood and coal," Bobby replied. "I can make more if we need them." "Watch away from here." "Well, that's the beauty," said Ben. "There's no wrong answer. It kind of sounds like there are no right answer. There's no guarantee. That's why it's an adventure." He hefted his pickaxe. "Start digging and see what you can find." Bobby huffed as he directed. She didn't find much of anything through andesite, diorite, granite. But soon her inventory was full of various types of stone. "Just dump that stuff anywhere," Ben told her. "What? You mean litter?" Bobby shook her head. "I'm not really comfortable with that." "It isn't littering," Ben insisted. "You're just putting it back." She sighed. "You can arrange it artificially if it makes you feel better." Bobby began stacking excess stone in single columns while Johnny tugged lightly in his lead, growling with boredom. Ben was clearly distracted and unnerved by the noise. "Growling is usually my first sign of danger's coming," he said, so he's sort of throwing me off. "Do you have any more bones for him to gnaw on?" Bobby asked. "You're spoiling him," Ben said. He stopped over in the dark corner in the cavern. He placed the fence post in the ground and then stopped back to take Johnny's lead. "Careful," Bobby said. "I know," said Ben, and he fixed the lead to a post. "He'll be fine over there, and over here." Ben across the opposite side of the Bobby placed a small chest beneath one of the torches. He picked up the chest to Savannah Town, promising it would become handy eventually. "We can keep everything we're not actively using inside the chest. That's why we're not littering, and we'll have plenty of room in our inventory for anything exciting we might find." "Makes sense," said Bobby. She opened up the chest and filled it with stone, coal, wood, and emeralds. She held on to the witch's journal, the seashell, and the strange idol she'd taken from the evoker, plus her iron sword and pickaxe, which both were beginning to show signs of wear. She got back to digging immediately after that. More stone, more coal, and then a golden glint shone through the slab grate. "I think I found some gold," Bobby said excitedly. Ben peered over his shoulder. "No, sorry," he said. "That's iron." Bobby groaned. "It's super useful," he said. "Our tools won't last forever, so you might as well grab iron while you can find." "If you say so," said Bobby. She tried not to feel discouraged, but this was already taking longer than she hoped. It was difficult, monotonous work, and the cave was eerie, even though the haunted house, that space at least, appeared habitable, meant for people. The chandeliers and the bookshelves and chairs. Underground, she felt like an intruder in a landscape that she was not meant for her, a cold, alien place that did not care to her comfort. She was silence, in particular, unnerved her. The silence? Why was it silent all of a sudden? Bobby poked out a little hole she was digging, and looked over for Ben and that tied up Johnny. The fence post was right where she remembered it, but her brother was nowhere to be seen. "Johnny's missing," she cried. "Say what?" said Ben, who popped down in his own hole. He said it was an empty fence post. "Oh no," he said, and looked wildly in every direction. "He could be anywhere. He could attack us at any moment." Bobby huffed. "More important, my brother could be lost underground forever." "Oh right," Ben said sheepishly. "Yeah, that would also be bad." And that's the end of today's story. Kind of a cliffhanger. But, yeah. It was interesting enough. So, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. But before we go, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to check off on my whiteboard, which you guys can't and or never are going to see, my list. Let's see, where is it? And by it, I mean where the heck is where's my marker? I have markers right here. I just have like a specific one. Yep. Next one we're reading is 124 to 139, which is 15 pages. 124 to 139. And let's see, that's chapters 20. It shouldn't be too many chapters. 23 to 139, which is 25. So yeah, only 2 chapters. But then again, it's only 15 pages, so hey. But yeah, hope you guys do a fantastic, wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.